going to introduce
Close the
you
door.
and let's go.
So I have the honor to introduce my brilliant student, Marylis Fantoni. She is a final year student at the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. She successfully published already the first paper of her dissertation, and the second paper is now under review, and this is the third paper that I believe that is gonna be very well published. And she recently got a wonderful job. So we are welcoming you and to present our third paper, and this is the first time that I'm gonna see the results actually of this paper, and we really appreciate all your comments. Thank you.
Hey. Great. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to present research here at the Ostrom Workshop. It is actually the only place on campus that has seen all three of my papers so far, so not even my department yet. They will see when I defend. But yeah, so this is my third chapter. It's called When a Protective Order is Denied, Causal Evidence on the Role of Judge Gender. Very excited about it. Brand new. I have just finished the draft last week, so you get a first view of my results. All right. So as I was researching domestic violence, I came across this article from 2022. It reads, "Judge denied protective order to woman who was later shot to death." This happened in Columbus, Indiana, by Christmas time of 2022. It was a horrific circumstance, but what got me interested in it is that this newspaper called The Republic, it's a local one in Columbus, they were hinting at the fact that the judge who denied the order has a higher denial rates than other judges in the county. So there are two other judges, and they were saying that this particular judge denies protective orders a lot. And so this got me interested in this idea of, all right, what happens once somebody files for protective order? What is the black box, the judicial black box, if you will, after somebody files for a protective order? And I wanted to research this systemically. So I'm going to look at Indiana as a state, all protective orders granted or denied in the state over a period of time. I'm going to look at the judges involved in that decision and their genders. But that's the idea here. This is, again, a very tragic event that happened, but I want to understand it a little bit further. So my key research questions for this paper are, what are the trends in terms of protective order denials in the state of Indiana? Who gets their protective order denied? As far as I know, nobody has researched that here yet. Are there consistent and significant differences in denial rates for female versus male judges? Do we see denial rate differences between appointed versus elected female judges in Indiana? So those are some of like the key ideas that I'm going to explore in the next slides. I'm going to give you a little bit of a context of, what does this process look like in Indiana for a protective order? And this is like similar across the US, right? There's some variation here and there, but in the US, in Brazil, which I also researched, they tend to follow along the same lines. So we'll start with filing, right? Anyone can file for protective order. You don't need a lawyer. The person, the victim, it could be a male, a female in Indiana, they can just go ahead and file it for themselves. They can do it online. There's a link, a portal, or they can do it in person. They can get assistance in either one of those circumstances. You might have the county clerk helping you, the court clerk helping you fill it. Online, you can access a couple of links. There are some pro bono lawyers. There's a very nice initiative called POP by the law school here at IU that also uses law school students to help people file protective orders. And then there's a number of reliefs that people can request when they file. Most common ones are no contact. So the alleged abuser cannot email, text, call alleged victim. Eviction, alleged abuser needs to leave the home. Custody of the children or of pets. Even in Indiana, it's interesting. You can say they cannot have access to, the children or the pets that they share. Financial compensation is also one. Restriction of guns is also a big one. Again, there are many others, but these are the most common ones, with no contact being like the highest order. Then, after the person has decided the type of relief they're asking, this filing goes towards judicial review, right? I'm simplifying this process here. There are lots of things, but in a nutshell, it's a judge's discretion to either grant a protective order or not, grant portions of this or not. There are guidelines as to what can be granted ex parte, meaning without having a hearing, right? So the judge sees those requests right here, and some things, yes, they can say so without hearing both parties. For some other things, there needs to be a hearing within 30 days, right? I'm not gonna go in detail, but there is some guideline on that. Protective orders usually have this urgency character to them, and so they tend to be granted or denied in the same business day. They tend to like go above anything else that a judge has to review on that day. And most importantly, the burden of proof is on the victim, right? The victim has to prove by a preponderance of evidence that there's a threat. There's a real threat there. So the victim has to show through whatever means they have, whatever evidence they could bring to this filing of the order. And then lastly, let's say this protective order is granted, then parties are notified, the aggressor is served that protective order. Protective orders are enforced by the police. So if somebody is trespassing, let's say the protective order says that they cannot come to the victim's workplace, and they come, the victim can call the police, and the police is going to come and deal with that. They will usually last for 2 years, but there are cases where they can be shorter, longer. It depends on the circumstance, but on average 2 years. If they're violated, again, if it's the case where the abuser comes to the workplace of the victim, for example, they're into criminal or civil process, depending on the severity of the charges and what's going on, right?
Just one clarification. Is there any law that regulates how this work, or is pure discretion of the?
There are guidelines. There's a document that all judges must abide, and then you have jurisprudence as well. So every once in a while, cases are going to go up to Court of Appeals, and so justices will then say, all right, this ruling by Judge X was correct. Now we all should follow that. So there's sort of like the jurisprudence, but there's law. It is codified, yes. There's a lot of discretion though, a lot of discretion, but some things are codified. For example, I think, I don't remember which one, but I want to say the eviction, you need to have a hearing. You cannot do ex parte, if I'm not mistaken, right? So there are some specific guidelines. Still, a lot of discretion on the judge, yes.
What happened after the 2 years? For example, it ended. Can't the
You
person
can extend.
right?
Yes, you can extend. Yes, it's on a case by case basis, right? If the judge, determines there's still a credible threat, then they can extend, yes. Or it could be the case where an order was originally issued for only a year, or whatever it is. Again, case by case, but this is mostly like average, simple case.
Now, it says that this is granted at the same business days. Do you see variation across courts? Are those that take more than 1 day?
I don't have that information. I know if it was granted or not, but I don't follow when it was granted. But yeah, I don't have that.
This might be out with the scope of your project, but do you have any idea of the efficacy of protective orders? It just seems like if somebody wants to kill someone, a judge being like, don't do it, or they'll call the cops, might not be like a deterrent.
I would love to talk about that. Can we hold that thought for the discussion? Because I think that's going to be very important to touch on, and I have many thoughts on that. Please remind me when I get to the discussion, when we're making sense of all of this. Yes. All right. And so this is sort of like the process here. I'm focusing with this paper here. I'm calling this, I teach econ to the undergrads. I'm calling this a supply and demand.
Oh, wow.
So I worked on the supply side, trying to get people to file protective orders in my chapters 1 and 2. And I look at the demand side, people trying to get the orders. Now I'm working at the supply side. What happens if you increase the number of orders on the other side. All right, so this is what we're looking at today. More context is that this is sort of like the judicial system in Indiana, right? So you have 54 judges across town and city courts. You have the bulk of judges here in superior and circuit courts, what we call trial courts. This is on a county level, right? While this one is on a town or city level, this is on a county level. So every county is going to have a number of trial courts. They could be circuit, they could be superior. Then you go on, you have the Indiana Court of Appeals, that's statewide, and then you have the Supreme Court, which is also statewide, right? Protective orders are reviewed here. Again, the bulk of judicial activity happens here, and that's what I'm looking at, right? So we're looking at about 318 judges. They see anything from protective order to I don't know if it's a civil case, alimony, everything that you think about, people are like suing each other. If there's a criminal case, a homicide, everything's gonna be here, right? So that's your regular sort of like judicial activity. And again, important to keep this in mind, it's at a county level. All right, so who decides which court reviews protective orders requests if there are multiple courts within a county? Each county has local court rules that are designated on a county level. They are approved yearly by the Indiana Supreme Court. So what happens is that, so we have 92 counties in Indiana. Vast majority of them have more than one court, right? Usually they have a circuit and a superior court, but some counties like Marion, so where Indianapolis is, they have 34 courts within the county, right? And so who decides who's going to get the protective order to review it? There are local court rules that are usually updated every year, some less so, and they are approved by the Indiana Supreme Court. There are 4 possibilities for caseload allocation. And this was created in 2006 because the Supreme Court wanted to ensure that we had some even distribution of cases. So no court would have 90% of the cases and then the other one only 10%, right? So they wanted to have some sort of balance. So there are 4 ways as to how the counties define caseload allocation. Random assignment between courts, sometimes pre-designated, right? They will say, all right, if we have 30 courts, only courts 1 and 2 will review protective orders and we will randomly assign between the 2, right? That could be the case, or it could be any court in the county can review protective order cases, but we'll randomly assign across all of them. Those are examples. The person filing can choose the court. Specific courts, somewhere might say only superior court will review protective order cases. And then this also is important. This is for the vast majority of courts, existing cases are kept in the same court. So if you have, for example, a divorce or a paternity issue, and then on top of that, there's a protective order being filed, it tends to go together. It overrides anything else that is said, okay? I brought you here some examples. So this is the textbook example of a random assignment. So this is for Sullivan County. So they're saying that the clerk will randomly assign cases on a 50-50 ratio between Sullivan Circuit and Sullivan Superior, and they're going to use a computer system to do so, right? The system that the orders are inputted in. So this is the example of random assignment. I will open a tangent here. This is what I call the textbook. Computer generates a number, fully random. Some other courts, they randomize by day of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're gonna send to courts 1, 2, and 3. Thursday, Friday, courts 5 and 6, and then they, work that around. Other courts, there's wide variation here. I talked to clerks of all counties. It goes as down as I flag whoever is in the hallway, whoever judge is available. So there are levels of randomness here, right? Some will be like by a month, every December order is gonna go to court X, every January filing is gonna go to court Y. Another one is there's a case tracking system where they allocate based on the least number of cases among each court. So there are levels of randomization. That's why I'm gonna conduct a sensitivity analysis. Discretion of the filing party example, this one says that the person initiating the action, meaning filing for the protective order, can say, I want to go to court X or Y or Z. Then you have specific court examples. This is for, I think this is more, no, I don't know which kind this is, but it says all protective order cases shall be assigned to the judge of Superior Court number 6. So it tells you specifically. And this is an example of issues of existing cases where I said if you already have domestic relations case, paternity case, or child issues, they have to be in the same court that has prior, yes.
And originally if I want to file a protected order, where should I go originally? To the police station, and then the police station reports to the court?
You can go to the court or you can file it online, either one of those options. You can click a link and go. You can also go to POP. Here at IU, we have the law school. They have like what they call it, where people can come in and they file. It's still online, but they're gonna have advocates like law students helping them. But the options are online or in person at the court. No police.
The court, no police, okay.
All right. How are judges selected then in this story? Each court has only one judge. Very few may have couple and a magistrate, but most, like 95, 96% have only one judge. So meaning the case being assigned to a court is automatically being assigned to the judge of that court. And judges will review protective order cases, right? Again, I think there was only 1 or 2 where the magistrate reviews protective orders and then the judge gives the final approval. But just for the purposes of this, judge review orders. How are judges selected into courts in Indiana? 3 ways: partisan elections, non-partisan elections, and appointment. Vast majority of the counties is a partisan election, so you just vote them every 2 years. They disclose what their party affiliation is, and people vote them. Judges are elected for 6-year terms, and they can or must, if they want to continue exercising that role, run for re-election, right? So 6-year terms, run for re-election, or just drop in and somebody else comes. There are no cap on numbers of years a judge can serve in Indiana. There are cases in my data where the judge has been there for 25 years, okay? So this is partisan. The only difference between partisan and non-partisan is that still elected, but you don't disclose your party affiliation, and that's only for 2 counties, Vanderburgh and Allen.
There's a mandatory retirement age for the Supreme
There's
Court.
a
is there?
there's a
For this
retirement,
too?
yes,
Okay.
yes, there is. 75, I want to say.
I think it's 75, yeah.
Then there is the case of Lake Marion and St. Joseph counties. Those are not election-based. Local commissions will submit names to the governor, who then appoints the judges. Judges will serve for 2 years, then they run for retention, meaning they're the only ones on the ballot. It's a yes or no vote to serve an additional 6 years, right? Complicated process, but just giving you some insight. Lake Marion and St. Joseph's are one of the most populated counties in Indiana, right? So there's been a debate on like, why do we still have appointment of judges? Why is it not all elected? Out of the scope of this research, maybe in the future, but just letting you know sort of like how this process works. All right, now let's talk about theory, right? What do the theoretical answers that I'm using here is going to tell me or expect that should come out of all of this? I'm using representative bureaucracy. It's a well-known theory within public administration at large. It says that when the composition of public service mirrors that of the population, we might see different outcomes. So passive, and it's distinct into 3 areas: passive, symbolic, and active. Passive means if we have 50% of women in the demographic, and then we have like 50% of public servants, that's going to bring some sort of like positive impact in public service outcomes, right? So just the fact of mirroring the population is going to bring important impacts and outcomes. Symbolic goes on to say, because we now have passive, we have, let's say, more women, or it could be in terms of race as well. Now, because we have more women, that is making an impact on how people, citizens, experience public service. Research has shown that people are more likely to co-produce, they trust more, it makes services more efficient just because they have somebody who looks like them, right? And then active is going to say, all right, now that we have, again, I'm using the example of women, but we could think about others. Now that we have more women in public service, they act differently, they behave differently, and they behave in a way to help those who look like them. Those who they resemble, those who they mirror, right? And so there are some examples of school teachers. So for example, Black school teachers and Black students, and how rates of gifted programs increase based on that. In the police as well, there are some examples that shows if you have more female cop officers, you have a greater likelihood of victims reporting sexual assault. And so it's a well-consolidated literature at this point. There is some importance on the role of discretion, especially when we're talking about active. Research has said that in order for us to see an active representation, meaning the person is there doing something for usually marginalized or minorities, they need to have a degree of discretion, right? They need to be able to exercise that discretion for favoring whoever it might be, and which is the perfect case here, right? Judges have a ton of discretion when reviewing a protective order. There's some research on the role of gender congruence specifically. So if I have a female public servant who's working with a female citizen, person enjoying the public service, that's usually a positive outcome or relationship, right? Again, in studies of police, for reporting of sexual harassment, in studies of school. When you have a female teacher and a female student, you get higher test grades and so on. So there is evidence here to the positive effects of gender congruence. Yes.
Is there like the reverse correlation as well to explain why? Maybe this is jumping the gun on what you're about to discuss, and I can hold this question. But if female to female congruence improves outcomes for people filing these, is male to person who is being restrained, male to male, is that
So
causing?
are
these
you
gaps?
asking like overall or for specific protective orders?
For protective orders, so like male judges, and like I said, maybe this is assuming a lot, but I would assume more females probably file POs than males. And so if there's a female to female congruence, does the male to person that is being ordered away explaining some of this dynamic?
Great question. So we don't have a lot on judiciary when it comes to representation. I'll tell you a little bit of what we know so far. Certainly nothing on gender congruence, right? Female judge and female victim, nothing there. What we know from the literature, and again, what I could find, I'm always afraid of speaking in absolutes because like, what if there's a paper that I've never heard about? But like what I could find based on my literature review, this is what we know. We know that female judges are different from male judges in their votings, in their rulings, and specifically when it comes to gender issues. So there was some research looking at discrimination, and they saw that female judges they will rule differently than male judges, right? And so, but they don't specifically like look at the victim sort of like, or the person filing their gender, but this is what we know. And there is some interesting research that can predict whether a ruling was made by a male or female judges. All of this to say they are different. There's a difference here between male and female judges, not specifically on domestic violence, but overall, right? They are different. There's almost nothing on domestic violence when we're looking at the gender of the judge. There's one qualitative piece that I'm going to bring back in the discussion, but there is this one right here. In Spain, they looked at protective orders specifically and the gender of the judge, and they did find that in Spain, female judges grant protective orders more than male judges. That's the only one that I could find. There are other ones that look at see how lenient female judges are based on sentencing for cases related not only to protective order but like harassment. But like there's only this specific one that looks at, and it has shown that female judges grant more protective orders than male judges, but the literature is still very sparse. There are big gaps there. Right.
Super.
So these are my hypotheses that I'll generate based on everything that I've said so far. Female judges are more likely to grant overall protective orders than male judges, going towards what we know from everything else that I said. Female judges are more likely to grant protective orders for female victims. So I am going to say, I'm going to try and see if there is a gender congruous story here, and that is a positive one. And I'm going to say that there's no difference between elected or appointed female judges in terms of protective orders granted. And why I did so is because representative bureaucracy, the literature itself, was mainly created to talk about bureaucrats, right? Not a judge, because a judge, if it's elected, they will not fall within the bureaucratic. But I will say that the work that judges do on a daily basis is very close to that of a bureaucrat, honestly. They have to follow a set of rules, they do have discretion, but like on the day-to-day, it's very similar to what, a bureaucrat would do. And this is what I say, like, election might not make a big difference here, right? Between elected versus appointed, it would still be the same because at the end of the day, the work that they do is similar. We could disagree on that or not. We could say that there's a difference between the two of them. Also, at the end of the day, even if you're appointed, you have to run for retention on your election, right? So you still ended up having, like, the way that you got in might be different, but you still have to have some sort of election mechanism behind.
Really? And what is the percentage of protective orders for the male victims?
For the what?
Protected orders for male victims?
Oh, yes, I'll show you.
Okay.
So essentially, another way is H2 may have like two, part A and part B. Female judges are more likely to grant protective orders for female victims, but less likely to grant protective orders for male victims.
Yeah.
And if H1 is true, then you have to think exactly what it means, because they are more prone to give protective orders in general, no?
Let's hold
But
on.
I don't know the
Let's
evidence.
wait for the results.
Maybe there is not,
And then we can conjecture if we see the answers.
but essentially, yeah. So it's
Probably
as an hypothesis.
because of that comment, it would be probably nice to have before this, like an statistics, when you provided the
Yeah,
the background of the
I'll
judges.
show you. I'll show you. All right. Perfect. I'll talk about the data really quick and then I'll show you all the descriptives that I have. So this is my data. This is possible. So for the IV, I'm looking at the gender of judges of every court of the state from 2006 to 2024. And let's pause here to say the amount of work that I had to go through to get this information. You would think this is public data because they were elected, right? Public data is a mess. I could not rely on whatever they have online. I had to triangulate election results data because they were wrong. What they had publicly available in some of those. Online information, there are two platforms called Ballotpedia and Trellis Law that sort of like track judges around time. And so I pulled that and I emailed and I called and I faxed asking questions to all county clerks of the state, 92. So I called, I emailed, I faxed. I got documents arriving at my house out of the middle of nowhere from like Sullivan Court. I had a Switzerland county court calling me, giving me information. Like it was wild. But anyway, so I'm only keeping the years 2010 to 2023 to match the dependent variable. Collection started with names of the judges, and then I manually checked each one to infer gender, 1 or 0. It was pretty easy, honestly. You know, Suzanne versus John, Mark, George. For the few that I wasn't really sure. I checked online pronouns and stuff, pictures. And then I take an election year, and then I infer judges to start the following calendar year, right? Because that's what usually happens. For my DV, I have exclusive access to data from the Indiana Supreme Court. I requested the data and they gave it to me. I can see all the protective orders in the state from 2006 to 2023, whether they were granted or not. I have two tables, one that gives me case ID number, the county, the court, whether it was granted or not. And then I have a person level table that gives me information about the victim, the alleged offender, and if there are children involved. And I see races, gender, age. So I merged those two to create sort of like the DV spreadsheet. I dropped cases before 2010 because there are some holes here and there. 2009 is when Indiana moves toward bringing all the protective orders into an online platform. And so 2009 is still somewhat spotty, but then 2010 or onwards, I see like really the universe of all of them. This is why I'm also dropping courts with less than 10 cases overall, because I feel like that this are so rare to occur. So I dropped them out of my, because I feel like those are outliers. But we could discuss that. And then I merged my IV with my DV to create sort of like the master data set. All right, now let's talk about descriptives. As of 2024, there are 95 courts with a female judge in Indiana. That means 1 out of 3 courts here has a female judge on average. Every election year, so the dashed lines, we're bringing more women towards the courts here of Indiana. Every election year, we get more and more and more women. And so it's an upward trend. These are the number of protective orders that I see in my data set. Short of 500,000, so 479,000 protective orders cases over this time period. I highlighted here like the ones, the counties with more protective orders, as we can expect, like Marion, which is where Indianapolis is, bordering Chicago a little bit towards here. Of course, where you have more people living, the likelihood of having more protective orders. But then I also look at it on a per capita basis. And interesting enough to me, so the warmer colors shows like a higher per capita filing of protective orders. So I see here on the border, maybe down here, not as much up there as I expected, but this is just contextual information. In 2023, there were 35,000 protective orders requests across the state of Indiana. This looks like there is some variation, but honestly, when you look at the figures, if I zoom out of this graph, we're between 36 and 31,000 protective order. So like, it hasn't changed that much. Yes, you have some up and downs, but like on the net, I mean, there's some variation, right? But not too much. And why is this important? Because denials of protective orders are skyrocketing in Indiana over time. Currently, 2023, half of all protective orders requests get denied in the state of Indiana. So we started 2010 with less than a third, so 27%, but today it is 50%. It is literally 50%. And so one story could be, oh, they're getting more cases, and so they're denying more because they don't have capacity. That's not true, at least not what the descriptive data is suggesting here, right? The number of requests is somewhat stable, but you have denial rates just skyrocketing at this point. Is this trend of denial rates driven by particular courts? So I go on and I looked at about 18% of the courts, 53 in my data, have overall denial rates above 50%, and they are sort of like spread across some of our counties. So yeah, there are some courts that are sort of like chronically deniers, I would call them. All right, now let's talk about the people involved in these cases. So 500,000 cases, that maps out to 1.1 million people involved in protective order cases in Indiana from 2010 to 2023. They are categorized between victims, aggressors, and dependents, right? That means 1 in 6 people in Indiana are involved with protective orders. It's massive.
So you're sure they're not repeated cases, same person?
Same person,
So
one
this is there's a identifier for person, but you are sure that it's a different one. So there is not in year 1, then another protective order for the same person again and again.
Because it could be that the person was
Repeated
denied
offenders
and
or
they
whatever,
apply.
or repeated applications.
Yeah, I don't follow people over time. Yes, you're right. So yeah, so it could be the
So
case.
these are cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good thought. They said that they could link the data. I mean, I don't trust that, but they said like, there's not a lot of repeated, but I don't have like a full information on that. All right, 1.6, let me just write it down.
Even extensions could be
Yeah, that's what, for renewals for it, is it?
extension.
Yeah, yeah. Let me think. I actually have a question mark here. I think they are assigned a new case ID. I think they are assigned a new case ID, even if it's an extension. I don't think the case ID follows over time. That's what I think. And so you would be right. It could be repeated here. Thank you. All right. What did I? Okay. All right. What is the profile of people requesting protective orders? To your question, victim profile. So I just average across, victims. 32-year-old, 76% of them are females, like vast majority females. With 2 dependents, 68% white. Aggressor profile similar, little bit younger, 28 years old, 70% of them are males. 2 dependents, 66% white, right? So sort of like what our minds would go to, women are victim, men are perpetrators. I also look at if the composition of victims has changed over time, because one story is denial rates are up because the profile of the victims has changed. Descriptively, I don't think that's true, because so victim age stays between 34 and 30. Victims female, almost no change, right? You go from 75 to 76%, so like there's not a change here. White, not a change as well. Average number of dependents, and then we also look at covariates for the aggressor. Also, like, not a huge change for you to justify, right? If we zoom out like 70 to 76, that doesn't make a lot of change. I mean, it could be a change in composition of the crime, and I don't have information on that specifically, but at least looking at the profile, I don't know. I don't think it has changed a lot. Okay, so who gets their protective order denied? Because I imagine, is there some sort of like bias or racism or whatever? Not really. It still sort of like follows who applies for the protective order, right? I'm not honestly seeing any indication here. And again, this is descriptive. Yeah.
Look at the background of the crimes. So I can imagine that between 2010 and 2023, online has increased enormously. Online harassment.
Oh, like for Indiana overall state, you mean, or for the specific case?
For protective order requests.
Oh.
It's not easy to email someone,
Okay.
call someone, or to follow Facebook.
Right.
do an X, whatever, so I can imagine
Yeah,
that.
like I know that over time they include stalking, you know, that was not something that they would see back in 2010. Yeah, I could look at that. That's a great idea also to try and strengthen the argument here. But anyway, so this is the victim of the profile of the people who get denied over time. Again, I don't see any major changes here, you know, maybe 5 or 7 points here, but like not drastically, right? These are like people getting denied over time. Okay. All right, we know descriptives can only go so far. Endogeneity issues, I'm gonna just speed it up. I'm gonna use my method, I'm gonna use random assignment of cases, right? Judge gets a case based on random assignment, and that's what I'm gonna use here. Dependent variable of interest is whether the case was granted or not. Independent variable, whether it was a female judge or not. I am using year and county fixed effects. I'm clustering my center errors at the county level because it's at the county where they are assigned to a court. That means that I get 136 courts, so about half of courts in Indiana will do random assignment. About half of the cases and half of the people in my sample, right? So out of everything, I'm capturing about half of it. All right, so here's the result. I had said that female judges are more likely to grant protective orders. That's false. Having a female judge decreases the probability of a granted protective order by 5.67% relative to the baseline probability for male judges. And this is statistical significance. In other words, what this means is that female judges in about half of all courts of Indiana consistently deny more protective orders to the order of almost 12%. So I'm just taking that number and flipping it on its head. Female judges in Indiana are 12% more likely to deny a protective order than male judges in the courts of my sample. So half of the courts of the state.
I assume that surprised you.
But it did, because
Right.
it goes against my theory
Right.
and everything that we believe about representation.
Yeah. What's going on?
Then I hypothesis 2 was that female judges are more likely to grant protective orders for female victims. Gender congruence, no effect. We should be looking at this interaction here, no effect at all. So no support for gender congruence in Indiana. And then lastly, that there is no difference between elected or appointed female judges, and that hypothesis is supported because it's not statistically significant. So there's no difference between an elected or an appointed judge on all those 3 counties that we talked about. Why do we see those results? Now I'm trying to make sense of it, right? Let me talk about some of potential explanations that I've looked at the research so far, but I'm sure you might come up with more. So there's the role of discretion of the judge, and that the burden of the proof is on the victim, right? There is one qualitative work that found that when protective orders get denied, it's not because there's not evidence, but it's because of the narrative. So maybe the people fighting for the protective order did not, convey it enough, or there was something lacking. So it's not that there's not domestic violence occurring, it's just that the narrative was wrong. And so it could be the case that female judges have a higher bar for granting protective orders, right? Maybe they think, all right, in order for me to say yes for a protective order, I need to see a lot of evidence. Maybe females have a higher bar than males. And if we abstract a little bit, not in the protective order realm, there's another piece looking how female judges, they tend to write opinions that are longer than males, and people are saying that female judges, they need to signal legitimacy more than male judges, that they deserve to be on the bench, sort of thing. And so we could get at those conclusions to say they have a higher threshold. The bar for female judges is higher because they want to make sure that they're getting it right. They're not having a wrong conclusion here. Another possible explanation is the role of bias. There's one qualitative piece in North Carolina, really good, that interviewed female and male judges. They don't make a distinction as to who said what, but they found that judges in North Carolina believe that there are stereotypes of domestic violence victims. There's the real victim, the person who has a credible threat, and there are those who abuse the system and have futile, they're trying to get the court to get back at their ex-husband or to get more money in the divorce or whatever it is. And so the judges see themselves as I need to uphold the law. I need to find out who is the right or who is the wrong. And then the researchers come to the conclusion that those are really stereotypes, right? What are the biases that are coming to the judges? There's there are fantastic quotes from that study. So it could be that female judges have more bias towards who is a true versus a false domestic violence victim. I don't know if electoral considerations could be one, right? And I think it sort of goes against what I've been saying so far, that, electoral consideration doesn't matter, but it could be that female judges, they might be thinking about, I want to be reelected, so I need to somehow please my voters. And what does that mean for domestic violence? Being, I don't know what else could come out of this. This is what have made sense so far.
Have ideas.
Just I think this also has contribution for representative bureaucracy. Is it context dependent? If we take it out of education, maybe police and some of the other examples, and we bring it to something else, does it mean that we're testing the borders of it and maybe it doesn't apply here? And then this is the last thing that I want to say. I don't have any normative suggestions in terms of the merit of having half of the protective orders denied. It could be the case that 50% of those protective orders denied are warranted, right? They are not protective orders. They are more like alimony issues, fights between, ex-spouses. Could be. However, I will point to the impact of denied protective order. I'll go back to the first slide that I shared. Some cases when a protective order is denied, what you're doing is you're empowering the aggressor. Now that the victim has turned to the justice and the justice has said, no, screw you, apparently, the abuser now can go in and say, all right, now I'm stronger. I can come back and kill you. Or there's also the argument that it doesn't matter. Protective order is just a piece of paper. Somebody who wants to murder somebody, not going to do anything with that piece of paper, right? There is some people that say that it is a deterrent, just the threat of calling the police because they have a protective order can stop aggression, So it's it's a messy process to be in. But with that, thank you. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Claudia.
Claudia, questions for the students first.
I forgot.
Okay.
Don't qualify as students. Sorry.
Students of life, but
There are students here? I don't think so.
I'm not a student.
no, yeah, so it's okay. Yeah, no, feel free.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all good.
So
You're next.
would it be possible, first of all, who assesses the judges? Do they have an annual evaluation about the number of protected orders that they grant? It could be that they themselves, they say, oh, last year I granted 50%, 60% of the protected orders. This year I need to be more tougher. I don't know, something like that. So taking into account the percentage of protected orders granted in the year before or in the month before that. Second, would it be possible if I was appointed or elected as a judge that the first year, as no one knows me, I'm gonna be very tough. But then as I have gained more power and more autonomy, and here I'm gonna be just deciding on what I think that this is right or not. So whether it is contingent on the experience of the judge in the particular court, the superior or the circuit. And that would be tough, I know, for the data collection, how many years the person has been there, but probably based on experience. It means there is a lot of literature about seniority. The more seniority you have, the more autonomy you have on the cases and more freedom for you to decide. And the beginning, as an assistant professor in public meetings, in faculty meetings, usually we don't talk, yeah? And so as we move to such a professor, you speak out a little more. And then when you become full professor, no one stops you from So these are the two things. And also, who assesses those judges?
Yeah.
Because above of them, there are other judges, yeah? And I guess that they have to respond to them. So I don't know what is the criteria that they use.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I was thinking about cold calling a couple of judges in Indiana to ask some of those questions. My gut tells me that I doubt that they keep track on I denied or I approved X orders, because I feel like protective orders is one of the many different cases that they will review. And I think even let's say they have aspiration of climbing up into the Supreme Court, I think it's a package of stuff, not just a protective order. But I could ask them. What I know is that what could happen, it's not specifically a judge evaluation, but if somebody appeals a protective order, it might go to the Court of Appeals. And then the justices in the Court of Appeals might say they ruled it wrong or right at the lower level. So that could be one form of assessment. But it's an interesting question. So for the second one, contingent on experience, I am going to keep working on this paper for this year. I'm gonna get a control variable on experience. Because I track the name of them, I could just create a variable on the judge and be like, the number of years that they've been on that role. But I would imagine that, I don't know if the year effects, fixed effects would do something on that. But yeah, I might work on a control for that.
Now, another point is, and actually I was on the play yesterday with a judge next to me and we were talking. And I said, well, it must be a very busy work. And she said, no, I have actually many helpers, many people who helped me. When they bring me the case, they already have they give me a draft, the base and what we thought. So now I was thinking about this case. I don't know whether those that are surrounding the judges, because even they have to make the decision in one day. Imagine with so many cases that they have in one day to make the decision. So I guess that when the case is brought to the judge, already has like a some draft decision from the aides.
And I think there's variation there in terms of capacity. I think like some courts like in Marion, they might have like bigger staff, but like in other places like Sullivan or Switzerland, where there's literally only one court, then the judge doesn't see as many of those cases. So I think there could be a big variation
So
there.
some of the reviewers might go into bureaucratic capacity or organizational capacity.
Perfect.
I did just want to say overcompensation might be a good umbrella term for the sorts of things that we're talking about. But also I am curious if you think that seniority development correlates with a gender dynamic. Because what you would be looking at, I would think, would be both males and females changing their behaviors based on how much latitude they're given based on seniority. So I was wondering if those are actually.
I don't know, maybe if we believe that election is gonna make any results on like how they judge, like if a female, let's say a female on their first term, if they believe that, oh no, I have to sign legitimacy and have my bar really high so that I can get reelected. And then maybe once they get reelected, then they're like, oh, okay, maybe I could change the criteria, like I don't have to be so tough. If that is
Specific to women's experience?
I don't know, like at this point, it's a maybe. I don't know, males might be like, well, I'll get reelected anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Sorry, just to keep talking this through in my own head, this is hopefully a little bit useful, but you were talking about how quickly women are taking these places. So I would assume that there's probably a majority of them in lower courts, because this is a newer phenomenon, right? If you're saying every single year we get more and more women represented in these positions, then maybe they haven't had the time to ascend to these higher levels. And so maybe this does have a really, really useful correlation with what you're looking at, because it's just not been enough time for them to parity.
But they're like, yeah, but I think the question here then becomes like, why are we seeing like denials? Because again, like my theory would say, all right, they're new, so maybe they will just so I interview judges in Brazil, not in Indiana yet. So, and in Brazil, the female judges that I talked to, they're like, I will always grant a protective order because I like to err on the side of caution, right? And so if my prior to this is like, if you're new, you're just newly elected, you're gonna be cautious. You're gonna be like, all right, I'm granting it. If it's not, if it's not supposed to be, or if there's not like due process, they will come to the hearing. We'll hear then. I'll dismiss the case then. But it's not the case.
I
Right?
have two thoughts on this, and this is really fascinating work. I'm in a somewhat different line, so I'm into social policy, but to some extent, I found anecdotal evidence in my own research on the same dynamics that you found. So older caseworkers tend to be stricter towards older unemployed because they think, I managed to get a job, you should be able to get a job as well. So they ask for more weekly applications and so on and so forth. And minority caseworkers seem to be stricter towards minority unemployed because I managed to get this job, so you should be able to get one as well. I can to some extent think that this might be the case here as well. So a female judge thinks I dealt with my own ex-husband in a correct way without involving the police, so you should be able to do so. That's one dynamic that might be the case. And the second dynamic, I think, is also, as I suggested perhaps already in my previous question, over time. I tend to think that online violations might be considered a bit less intense. And I think you'll have a higher amount of online violations in your cases. So over time, we'll have more female judges and more lighter cases, if you want, because they're online violations. So I think there might be a second dynamic, but I think that I did not come across research that actually exposes this being strict towards people that look like you in a quantitative way, but I came upon it in some qualitative studies. That's something that might be of relevance here. And then perhaps finally the same for male judges. So I was to some extent, I would never be like that with my wife, so you should not be able, you should not do that as well. You should not threaten a wife because I did not. So this is dynamics of being stricter towards people that look like you.
Yeah, so I would love the sources of those two that you said about the minority workers.
Yeah.
If you can just send me later. There's also, yeah, I just didn't know how to put into words what you said about, like, you know, I've been through this, like, I don't know, females maybe thinking that women should be tougher, or that, you know, they're not really using the justice the way that they should, that they're like I hinted at with the bias, because that's what we have in qualitative work. There's also another thought that I have is that if a woman is elected in Indiana, which is a red state, it could be that they are tougher at the from the get-go. Sort of like you have this bias here that, like, in order for a woman to be elected, they need to show that they are. But then again, in my mind, what that would mean is they need to show that they are tough on crime. So they would grant protective orders. So what is not making sense here is, like, why would they not grant the protective orders, right? Because a lot of people that run on Republican platforms are like, we're tough on crime, you know. So,
But maybe they require tougher evidence.
So I think I was thinking in that direction. So essentially, but what can you do empirically? Do you know the political color of the judge? Why don't you control and see what's going on there?
I could as well. There are some gaps because you have the appointed judges, the non-elected judges. And so I could control for a portion of them. I'm thinking about controlling as well.
But the appointed ones, you know who is appointing, and you know if it's red or blue.
I know the governor who's appointing, yeah.
Essentially, you should assume that it's aligned, no?
I know.
I know. Well, again, at least with the ones that are elected, you can do it, no? Then the other thing I was thinking is what happens if you make a mistake, essentially? Okay, so the way you started your presentation, no, it was essentially a mistake. A protective order is not granted, and then something bad happened. It's much worse for you if you are a judge, a male judge. It's much more problematic for you. So essentially, that will give you the reverse bias. Okay, so essentially, women know, okay, if I made a mistake, they cannot blame me because I was not, you know, I'm not doing gender discrimination. It was another woman. Okay, but if I'm a male judge and then I am not granted an order to a woman, then I can be blamed of gender discrimination. And because of that effect,
Male judges.
so I think between bias on, so you have selection on who becomes a judge, okay? So essentially could be that. But for the first thing, I think you can do something, no? Because you can control for political color. No?
Yes.
Yeah, I can. For a new iteration, I control
For
for
the second one, I don't know what you can do because it's like it's just a potential explanation, but it's very difficult to do something empirically, no? It's almost impossible. The third thing I was thinking, but again, almost impossible to do something empirical, is that if there is difference in the level of information, so it's like how good you are extracting information, okay? Because you can know better if this is a truthful or a fake request. But again, in order to do that, you need to know what would be the optimal one, and you don't know, okay? Because it could be the case that women are correct or male judges are closer to the truth, or they may both be biased, okay? So it's like more protective orders should be granted even than men are granting, or less than what women are granting, okay? So we don't know, we don't have any normative,
So I have
benchmark there, so socially.
an idea for following up on this would be to get the linked data and see how many protective orders get re-requested. So like if you deny, and then if a female or a male judge denies, and then somebody applies again, or if something goes to the Court of Appeals. So I wanna get linked data.
No data on violations, I presume.
I don't see it here because I think then it's gonna go to the police, right? I think, because
That might also be once a protective order is violated,
you know,
you signal that it was correct. If it does not get violated.
Quickly too, I mean, you can repackage this data, I think, for a lot of different audiences and outlets. So for what it's worth, I think you could easily do a law review article out of this. It depends on, for your tenure purposes, if that's gonna be, useful or not. But usually law reviews are starved for empirical data like this, and they love to see it. So if we can chat, we can connect you with others who might be, interested in writing something like that. But I haven't seen something like this presented, and I'm sure there would be a lot of interest if you'd like to go down that road.
I think, did you have a hand?
I'm fascinated by how we can go through every social norm thought experiment, and then we just keep falling on either side of this fence back and forth. And I think that's amazing. And because I wanted to toss in this idea that, I mean, we know that women in professional settings have this pressure to not perform expected behavior, right? So I'm wondering if female judges are everyone's gonna think that I'm gonna be sympathetic to women and I have to prove them wrong, right? And that kind of goes along with this idea that it's the tough ones that got elected from the get-go, right?
Yeah,
Every little experiment.
I think at the end of the day, I'm gonna call those judges and I'll be, hey, what's up? Even it's like the high denial ones, I'm not gonna tell them, but I'm like, hey, so walk me through your process.
Upper fire of the judge.
Yeah, I this is fascinating. Yeah, Claudia.
Is it possible to compare denial rates for those judges that are elected versus not elected in the year of elections?
Yeah, I can see when they would match up, but I could you're interested in the first year that they take the seat.
Or the year prior elections, because if they are gonna be reelected, you said that they can be reelected forever. That there are judges that have been 25 years.
Yeah, and they're kind of a product of that political context.
Exactly. So because we have a short-term memory instead of long-term memory, so they say, okay, this year is elections time, so I needed to be to grant a more either protected orders or less protected orders in order to be reelected.
Yeah, and this year's themes are violence against women, and then that year's themes are tough on crime.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. That's sort of a definitive there.
It's like politicians do with granting subsidies and the election years.
Yeah, we know their electoral considerations are sort of key for some, but I mean, yeah, I think maybe those who've been on the bench, again, I think there's wide variation there, right? For counties where people have been on the bench for a long time, election's not gonna change anything, but I think for those where, for example, Marion, so Indianapolis, where they are appointed, there's high turnover. Some other council, Morone County, there's been some turnover as well of new judges coming in. Sometimes so here in Morone County, we've had women following up women. There are only 2 cases in the entire data set where you have a woman and then it reverts back to a man, from an election. Most of the counties, once you elect a female, it's gonna be female all throughout. Even like if you switch females, right? If you switch female judges, but once you elect, it tends to stay female for a long time.
A very interesting case, yeah.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Right?
Maybe we can continue one-on-one, but this is. Performance review. They all have CLE.
Because I mentioned that by the end of this week.
I don't know to what extent.
But I'm gonna go back.
That's interesting. They're having to choose what extra,
My,
the extra education or
But we,
this area, that could be kind of telling.
What is the acronym CL?
It's a continuing legal education, the CLE. Yeah.
which one is?
I'm gonna mention this to Angie too, because this is right up her alley with her council work.
Oh, nice.
you find
This
it.
is awesome.
Thank you.
So much work in digging. Well done. Oh my God.
Sorry, write down for, so
Uh-huh.
How are you? Good, how are you?
most of the.
I love it. You said-
Yeah, but
I don't have that data,
Need to be.
but that could happen.
Yeah, so usually
Somebody's looking without
it's
a.
weird that Julio didn't or
They would.
text me, hey, Gustavo, we have to do this, so it's okay, no
what
worries.
happened, but I'm so glad that there are not so many.
This would be-
I mean, I love the paper. I just said, add a little more.
Go to a few-
So, but in the file that you made.
The law firm does.
Yeah, of course, I have the comments. I did it immediately because that's why I was.
Your results, just say,
One is another data.
something, am I missing something?
I have a meeting with Supervisor tomorrow and then I. No, I know, but it's good. Remind.
Otherwise, I will do so much. To
Absolutely, in the county area,
you.
they've got a good history, and they would tell you, okay, we know this.
Yeah, so interviewing not judges, but lawyers as well.
I was hitting that.
Yeah.
Can you help me file a protective order again?
Yes, Claudia.
Oh, yeah, because she's been chasing me to finish a chapter and at this point, I think it's cool project. I like it. So it's, yeah, so it's, I think I may send you a paper. I have a co-author that, did something, so it's a very different context, but it's evidence of female versus male legislators and how they match with what male and female wants in terms of policies. Okay, and I think he was finding. In that case, I think he was finding no difference. Okay, no significant difference. It's like you have a male politician that essentially kind of following. So if your constituency want to go in a direction that is more is something that women want, you go in that direction. And if it's a female legislator, it's the same. So he was not finding a lot of difference. And it was also kind of a surprising result because he was expecting effects and then he couldn't find. So I'll look for the paper and I send it to you because maybe you want to put this kind of in a
Like,
kind of an overall context. So it's not okay. So it's like there are almost no paper on the judicial area, but maybe there are similar evidence in other instances.
because it's funny because the representation literature, you either get a positive or a new result. It's hard for you to find like a negative.
A negative
result.
one.
But if this one is sort of like.
Yeah, and then so I was thinking, so because again, so some potential explanations, and then you will not be able to do anything in the data. Well, you discuss it in the discussion of the paper and the conclusion because nothing can be done. But for the selection, so if in order to be a judge, a woman will look very different from an average woman from the population, but then a male judge will look much closer to an average man in the population. So I think with the political color of the judge, you should get something there because, so for example, yeah, I don't know how many observations you will have, but I'm sure that there are blue judges, okay? Some, okay, so,
Yeah, but actually that makes it even better that most of them are conservative here.
Yeah, there's gonna be, I could control, but you're right, there's gonna be a small variation.
what if you do the same thing, but only for the blue ones?
If there's a change, yeah.
So it's
Like restricted analysis.
But the blue ones, maybe
or
they
only
are.
to the reds, or whatever, you can control, it's the same, so essentially you.
Marylis, do you have the age of the judges?
It's very hard to find. No.
Yeah, maybe for the blue ones, because there are some that they are not allowed to, they don't need to specify the political affiliation, yeah?
Yeah.
So at the very least, you will be able to see where the effect is coming from, no? It's because imagine that you don't find difference from red and everything's coming from blue, and you don't find difference from blue and everything's coming from red. That tells you something, no? So essentially the story that you really need to be a conservative woman in order to be appointed as a judge or elected as a judge looks like a place and more important role for red judges than from blue judges. So you should, so the hypothesis there should be it's only on the red ones, no?
But I think the mismatch, at least in my mind here, is, all right, you need to be very conservative to be elected. The way that I would read conservative in this case is conservative is tough on crime, so they are going to grant.
Oh, no, I think conservative means the gender woke versus non-woke prompt, the polarization in the political arena, it's you are pro-women, pro-feminism, against feminism. That's what is dominating this.
So this is why a conservative.
That's the political bias. A conservative will be anti-feminist, and a progressive will be pro-feminist. And then essentially, yes, if there are some ideological bias, I think we'll go in that direction. So essentially, a conservative woman would be tough on crime because she's conservative, but she will be even tougher on feminism, even tougher on feminism, against feminism, essentially.
Disrupted. Exactly, pro-family, so they don't want the family to be disrupted, and granting a protected order is just to disrupt the family.
Well, or even she might be more likely to believe that there are women over abusing the protective order.
The only problem that I think into going into politics, do you think it disqualifies you? Because if we're
And I was gonna tell you that I heard that no more papers.
Oh, yeah, I've
will
heard
be
that.
published.
Okay.
So I was going to tell
Okay.
you maybe to focus more.
Yeah, there's not a lot of gender.
Yeah, I think you have, okay, strategically, because you are finding evidence against a theory. So everybody that is invested in that theory will not like your results. And then people that do not care about this theory, they wouldn't care if you remove that or you rely on a different theory. So I think it's very risky to put it in the framework of representative bureaucracy.
Maybe people are tired already of that literature, are tired. And representative bureaucracy goes very sure to Ken Meyer because he's the lead. Actually, I'm working on a paper similar to this, but this is, and it's about gender. And I found the same results that you found. So we analyze all the civil service examinations in Mexico, almost 3 million positions. And guess what? We found from the 5 exams that a person takes, we have the score for each person. But the decisive dimension is the interview. And the interview is done by 3 people. We found that when there are 3 men in the interview process, less likely to select a woman. And when there are less women, 2 men and 1 woman, more likely to select 2 men and 1 more likely to select a woman. So we are framing that paper is with gatekeepers, women as a gatekeepers, not too much a representative bureaucracy because people are tired already of that.
Yeah.
So gender congruence probably could be
Okay. Yeah, there's not a lot on gender
There
congruence.
is nothing about, there is not too much
So-
about gender congruence.
So the other thing that people, I know, I don't think that people will, maybe reviewers, because this is a very politically incorrect comment that they will only consider under anonymity. And so you may get something like this, and maybe you want to think how to address that, is that there is, so women know better how women lie, and men know better how men lie. So essentially, they are better detecting the crappy ones. So essentially, I know you, how you are lying. So you see,
That for a second paper where I track those.
so but empirically, what can you do with that? It's almost impossible.
Right now,
Nothing.
nothing, but once I request the new data set that I want, that links across time, I could see, for example, all right, female judges are saying they're good at detecting lies.
Yeah.
Let's look at their denials. Does it mean that their denials, people are coming back and requesting it again, so the female judge was wrong? Or are their denials going to the Court of Appeals, and then we can prove that female judges were wrong?
So essentially, what I would say, so with all these possible arguments, it's you will not have something like, an identification strategy. It's almost impossible. But you can start adding evidence in the direction, hey, what you are suggesting doesn't look that is playing a role, okay?
What about?
And something like this would be like that. So, okay, so I think that logical is a possibility. If you push me, I would say probably not very important, but still, how do you deal with that? Well, okay, so you come up with this, hey, empirically, the best we can do is this, and it doesn't look that's the case.
I'm thinking for a second chapter, a mixed methods, qualitative interviews with some judges to get an idea, and then sort of like assessing their probability of getting a case right or wrong once I have the linked data. So then I would select, out of everything, I would select all of the denial rates, and I would ask the Supreme Court to give me data on those who were denied, so I can follow them over time, see if they come back and they apply again, see if they go back to the Court of Appeals.
Because I was going to tell you, can you check only on those appeals to see whether the cases were decided different under a different gender judge?
Right now, I can't from data that I
Because that
have,
would be the other thing,
Because it-
the
but-
appeals.
but in the future, I can request.
The appeals.
Yeah.
The problem with appeals is that you have a bias because only appeals somebody, which I know, weak cases probably do not appeal, no? Only
Yeah.
strong cases appeal.
Not only, there's not even the merit of weak and strong, but people who have resources, let's be honest, right? You will
Yeah.
appeal if you have a lawyer.
Yeah.
Need a lawyer
And
for
then you can
appeal.
lawyer up and then go.
Yeah,
I found very hard for a victim to be denied and then just have the willpower of appealing. I find it very hard.
yeah, so it's,
But anyway, and I don't even know what the N is, right? I don't know how many protective orders appeal or how many people reapply. So once I do get that data, then it would be interesting.
Now, the other cases that the victim was not a woman, not all of them might be men. It could be also now transgenders or all of this. Do you have
No, the
information?
gender is
Because people are gonna ask you, who are the other 32 cases? 32% cases are just men?
Yeah.
wait, one more thing that could, so there is a trend of increasing in denial rates, no?
Yeah, and training increasing women judges.
Yeah, but I think it would be interesting to plot the descriptive data on men and women judges, the deniability rate, how it's evolved over time among men and women judges.
Yeah.
Because what is going on is there are two potential scenarios that you can envision. Everybody is denying more.
Yes.
Men are denying exactly as they used to deny, but now because you have more women judges, that's what is rising the deniability
Yes.
rate. So essentially, what I'm suggesting is a back of an envelope calculation of what is driving the
50%.
the increase in the denial rate, and if this is the reason or something else is going on. I suspect there is something else. So I suspect this is what I suspect. The woke versus no woke, feminist versus anti-feminist is becoming more and more politically loaded. And then all the judges are increasing so all the conservative judges are denying more protective requests.
So they are anti-feminist.
Yes.
I don't know if I don't know. What I think could be happening as well is another story, but then I don't know how we separate the gender, is that composition of cases are changing over time. You're getting more denials maybe because cases are less violent. For example, maybe if in 2010 a protective order was for somebody being sexually assaulted, and now 2023 is because people are stalking you on Facebook, you know, and so they'll be like, oh, I'm denied. I think this could be an explanation.
Sure.
This is more likely to me, but then again, it doesn't explain why I get results on the female judge versus a male judge.
But I think you empirically maybe you can deal with that because the number of cases is stable over time. Okay.
Yes.
So then why don't you check the prevalence of crimes related to those things? And if you show, because what will be the situation? You became really good deterring domestic violence. Now people they are not using anymore the protective orders for tough domestic violence cases. They are using it for, I don't want you to take my dog, okay?
Exactly.
And then the judges, okay? But if you see that domestic violence crimes are also
Prevalent.
the kind of more stable over time, it's more difficult that that's a good explanation.
Then you have to look at data and
But again,
police
The
data.
courts have those things, no?
it's still gonna be descriptive, right? And the geneity, yeah.
So what I'm saying is like, you sell the good identification strategy with cases are randomly assigned, okay? Now I found a result that is a little bit surprising, and I start kind of fishing for possibilities of answers. And then I don't think that people at that level for that part of the paper will ask you the same level
Of evidence.
of evidence, okay? But a paper that fight that battle of trying to kill some explanations and then see if some others look better will be a much better paper, because otherwise you have this empirical result, is surprising, and then, okay, what are we learning from this? Okay, that calls for explanations. And then you don't want other people writing the interesting paper with the explanations, so you put it in the same paper, the explanations. It makes the paper a much more thoughtful and interesting paper.
That the paper
And
will
you-
be longer.
Mhm.
And now remember that most of the journals are asking for 8,000 words.
Yeah,
Will
but
be
I
longer, that's okay.
Now-
I can
Marylis.
send some of the descriptors to the appendix.
Another question is, what happens with the judge grants the protected order? Does it imply more work for the court, for that court? Because that could be the case that they say, no, granting this order now is going to require us to do this, to write this, and to send this, you know?
But why difference between women and men? So men will be considering the same thing, no? That should be balanced. If I don't want.
In that case, it would be,
work-
yeah, but that case, yeah, so in that case, it would be more bureaucratic capacity.
I don't know, it
Check
depends.
check the blue and the red. That's, I think, if you push me, the starting point should be that, because if the story it's a political bias story, you should observe. So essentially,
Different patterns.
very different patterns. Essentially, it's
But the
the blue judges embracing the feminism thing, and then increasing decreasing the deniability rate, and then the difference between women
And I
and
guess
men.
that no one of the blue judge is appointed.
No, I have to check.
I guess that all of them are elected.
Yeah. I can do that. I don't think we're gonna have enough variation on the blue, honestly. I think we're gonna have very few blues that we.
Very few blues.
We're gonna have lots of red.
Yeah, but variation between the blues and the red, not across the blues.
Oh, but the descriptive statistics for the blue and the red.
Will be nice, okay.
That would be
Okay.
nice. It's like,
That's great.
so it's like-
Exactly.
so you plot. I think one of your starting plots is like you show more women's in one plot. Okay, that's okay. And then you have more deniability rate is going up in Indiana, okay? Well, now show me the deniability rate.
Based on political affiliation.
Yes.
For men and women. Yeah.
And also what
Yes.
Gustavo says, show the denial rate for men across time and show the denial rate for.
Yeah, so you have four
Time.
groups essentially.
I think-
Plot,
I think-
see what's going
I
on.
think so. It would be interesting to get the political affiliation, but also composition of crime, if I can get at that as well, to see
Yeah, so
if cases are not becoming less violent. This is why they're being.
exactly. So essentially,
Because I have
I'm
some
suggesting the
cases-
political thing. So, sorry, so
It's okay.
because it's cheap. I think that's something that probably
Yeah.
you can do it very easy. So if you kill that explanation, then you go for the more involved thing, which is composition of crime, because that will require a different data set, thinking about that's probably I would even suggest you try to get another paper from the composition of crime that is about composition of crime itself, and then you use that input in this paper, no? But again, I think these issues are becoming so politically polarized.
Yes.
So it's like we did a paper on environmental voting in Congress with Dean, okay? And then our initial idea was, okay, so whenever you are considering an environmental deal, but then you have some industries in your district that, you know, there may be, nothing kills the partisan effect. Nothing has the size of the partisan effect. It's almost impossible to find any other relevant economic variable that plays any serious role. So the partisan thing absorbs everything. So essentially, a congressional district is barely won by the Republican, barely won by the
To have
Democrat.
paper than in a blue state to see if we see the same.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that would be the case.
Like data from California and New York.
Like from California or get the data from
New York, maybe.
New York.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, but who is gonna do that other effort?
Oh my gosh. Well,
But then
for
what
dissertation, this is good, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
that
very good. No, that's a
Do anything for dissertation?
no, and then where are you going? So what's your next step in
I'm going
life?
to BYU, Brigham Young University in Utah.
Oh, cool.
So now
Good.
we have someone to visit in Utah.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Cool. Very good.
Beautiful place.
Very good, yeah.
Oh, you see, we were talking and people from here as.
Well, that's okay.
Nice.
Oh, we can't hear.
I was listening. I enjoyed the presentation. I did have a couple of questions, but that's okay. I'll catch you sometime.
Oh no, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
what
for
I
your
asked?
support.
I have to go. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations on
Send me
the
the paper,
yes.
the chapter.
Yes.
I was just wondering whether it would make a difference if you indicated that that people can file for protective orders online, and whether they're representative or not, they can do it with a representative or with a non-representative. And would that make a difference in the terms of the outcome or the type of information that is necessary to present to a judge to authorize a ex parte order? And if you don't meet those guidelines, the case would be dismissed. And if
Yeah.
you're a representative, you may not be able to do it properly. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I don't have in the analysis for the regression, I don't use courts where people can select where they want to file. So in the ones that I have, I only use random selection, but it could be the case that people with lawyers could have different outcomes. Somebody else came and said, oh, maybe you should go and talk to the lawyers as well. I think that's an interesting idea because I don't know, I feel like lawyers would have more information for sure and could have different outcomes. I agree.
Well, there was a comment about the people who may have to file a second petition. Maybe the aggressor have done it again. If I'm not mistaken, if there's a court order and they violated that order, it becomes a criminal matter of an invasion of privacy. It may, if you've got a representative, that's the next step in that process. I would.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
with that. And but anyway, I thought a very interesting presentation, and I enjoyed listening to you. Others would be, I think would be interested in your work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think once I can get the linked data so I can follow people over time, I can get some of that, you know, what happens if somebody violates it, what happens if somebody is a repeat offender, repeat victim. Thank you very much for your comment. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you and good luck and then congratulations.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.